trusting the process, because to be honest and to be real with you guys, life sucks sometimes. It doesn't go the way we plan it, and a lot of things that look like disappointments happen. I mean, just constantly. We looked at the book of Job, because I think if we're gonna compare having a bad life to somebody, we would look at Job. Job was a very rich man. He had a ton of cattle, which back then, if you had a ton of cattle, you were rich. He had a ton of kids. I can't quite remember how many, but he had tons of kids. And I forgot my Bible. I would have read you guys the verses, but anyways, so the devil, he ended up asking God to test Job because God told Satan that there is nobody like Job. He honored God, he avoided evil, he was a good man. And so Satan asked God to test him because he wanted to see and prove that, if since Job had everything, if you took it all away, that he would curse God. He wanted to prove that to God, so God allowed him to. And so he ended up basically killing all of his cattle. Every one of his children died. And then later, he sent these painful sores all over Job's body from head to toe, and he had to use part of a pot and scrape them off. And it was at that point when Job had cursed the day he was born, and, started saying things against God and all of this stuff. So, if you look at that part when Satan first did all that to Job, as a reminder, Satan had to ask God to do it. So everything that happens to you, to us, it's allowed by God, but not caused by him. And the reason he allows it is because everything, bad that happens to us are just tests. God wants to test our faith, how strong is our faith really, because obviously, we can have strong faith in God when things are going well, but what about when things aren't going so well? And, during these tests, he just wants to, make us stronger. When we go through, rough times, it's not because God doesn't love us, he just allows it because he wants us to grow stronger. He wants us to overcome obstacles that we wouldn't be able to do. And also, he wants us to realize that we can't do life without him, because if we just, went through life and everything was always easy, we would start to depend on ourselves. We wouldn't depend as much on God. We wouldn't pray as much. We wouldn't read the Bible as much. Having these rough times, it helps us in a way because it helps us realize that, we can't do it without God. And, we tend to seek God in prayer and in his word. And, when we go through these tests, it's really more of the inside that we want to look at. When we're going through rough times, how is our attitude towards the circumstances? Because, yeah, these circumstances around us may suck, but we have to realize that nothing that happens to us goes to waste. God uses every bad situation in our lives and turns them around and uses them for our good. Nothing goes to waste, and God doesn't allow these bad things to happen without using them later for our good. So, how is our attitude? And, it's a choice. Like, we choose our attitudes. It may seem like, these bad days, like, they kind of just make our bad moods, but we, ultimately choose them. And just, like, in peace, like, in these situations, we have to choose to have peace in God, knowing that even though it sucks right now, it'll get better. Have you ever, I'm sure you guys have seen this before, but like, and maybe it's even happened to you before, but you get a present, and it's in a box, and you open that box, and there's another box inside that one. You open that box, there's another box inside that, and there's just a bunch of boxes, and then eventually you get to the present. Yeah, I'm sure you guys have seen that before. But it's a process to open all those boxes. But inside is the gift. we have to, just like Job, at the end of Job, if you keep reading all the way to chapter 42, in the end, after Job had lost everything, he'd gone through all these tests, God gave him double of what he gave him twice as much as he had before. Of kids, of cattle, he gave him twice as much. So through the process is the gift. If you don't continue the process, you're not going to get to the gift. Just like if you had one of those kinds of presents, if you don't keep opening the boxes, you're not going to reach the gift. So you have to go through these processes. Now, in a real-world scenario, this process, the reason we have to go through it, it's so important because it builds our character. Our character really comes out during those times when, our faith is really tested, our attitude is really tested. When all these things are really put to the test, that's when we figure out and when others can see who we really are. Because anybody can put on a smile and act like good people, when things are going well. But when things are going bad, that's when your true self kind of comes out. And so these tests are kind of, they're for our help. God wants to help us. He wants to reveal the stuff that we may not even know we have, like pride, for example. Some of us may not even know we have pride. And God will use some of these tests to reveal that to us, to show us that we have it so that way we can fix it and become closer to Him. And one thing, I want to let you guys know this. Before we were born, God prepared our lives. He set our lives in place. He knew everything that was going to happen. He created every aspect of our life, and He planned everything out. So He isn't preparing the blessings for us. He's preparing us for the blessings. Because our blessings that we have for the future, they're already there. They're already ours. But before we get them, God has to, work on the inside of us. He has to kind of prepare us. He has to mold us and shape us. He just has to, work on the inside of us until we are ready to receive those blessings in those times. God's timing is perfect, so He's holding those blessings off until we are ready to receive them. And it may be taking longer than you thought, but don't let what you receive, or don't limit what you receive because you let your preferences get in the way of God's purpose. A lot of times we, have preferences. If you look at Job, he obviously would have preferred to not have to go through all of that he did go through, but God had a purpose behind all of it, and if Job had let his preferences get in the way of that, he wouldn't have received all that God wanted to give him. We need to set aside our preferences because God's ways are better than our ways. There's times where obviously our preferences seem better than what's going on around us, but in the end, God's way is better, and we need to trust that because, God, like I said, God's plan is perfect. His timing is perfect. Everything's perfect. And if you are close to God, you know how your story ends. You're victorious. There's victory in Jesus' name. And if you're with Him, you're going to come out with victory. No matter what you're going through now, if you know that you're coming out with victory, why stress? Why not trust Him, with whatever you're going through? And process isn't a setback, it's a setup. If you guys know the story of Joseph, he had several brothers, and they all hated him because he was favored by his father. And, they decided, one brother wanted to kill him, and the other one was like, no, let's throw him in this pit. So they threw him in the pit, and then he got sold into slavery afterwards. So obviously that seemed like a setback to Joseph, but in the end, he was second in command to Pharaoh and second in command over all of Egypt. So, and if you think about it like this, if he hadn't been thrown in that pit, he would have died because that one brother wanted to kill him. But the other brother, said, let's not do that, let's throw him in the pit instead. So, sometimes we look at the situation we're in and we think it's, really terrible, and it may be, but the thing is it can always be worse. What you're going through right now, God is putting you there in that situation to protect you from something that's even worse. We have to rearrange our minds sometimes. We have to really look at what we're focusing on, because that can determine our level and amount of faith in God. If we look at it, with this negative attitude, we're not going to see God in that situation. But if we think of it and look at it with faith, like if Joseph, when he was thrown in that pit and sold into slavery, if he would have looked at it right away with that faith attitude of, this isn't a setback, it's a setup. God is using this to lead me to my destiny, he wouldn't have been as frustrated as he was during some of those times. So it's really all about how you look at the situation you're in. Because yeah, it may be bad, I'm not saying it's never a bad situation, but it's always going to be worse if you have a negative attitude and negative outlook on it. You always want to go in to a situation with that faith-filled attitude, knowing that God is on your side and is using whatever you're going through to get you to your destiny. In fact, the whole life in general is a process. If you think about it, before we're adults, we're babies and we grow. That's a process. We have to go through that to become adults. Good grades. You don't get good grades until you study and you learn, you listen to teachers. That's a whole process that you have to go through. Working out. You have to continue to work out in order to, get the results you want. You want big muscles or whatever, lose weight. Whatever it is, you have to go through this process. You can't just, you're not just adults when you're born. You don't just get good grades. You don't just get big muscles. You don't just lose weight. It's all a process. And as long as you move, as long as you're moving, you're going to get results. Now, sometimes, I want to go back a little bit, because sometimes you can be moving backwards. It just happens sometimes, but God will always, pick you up, redirect your steps and all that. But if you're moving forward, even if it's just a little progress, you're fine. You're going to get there. God's going to, be with you. But I told somebody that I know, who's kind of going through a rough time a little bit. They kind of said, what is the meaning of life? And one of the things I said was, life is like a game, and you lose as soon as you stop moving. As soon as you stop trying, as soon as you stop having faith. When you stop having faith and you stop moving, you are inviting the devil. Let me rephrase that. You're surrendering to the devil, and you're saying, I give up. I don't trust. As soon as you stop moving, you've stopped trusting in God. It's as simple as that. When you stop moving, you have surrendered yourself to the devil, whether you know it or not. You have invited the devil into your situation. You are allowing him to speak to you. And, the devil is the father of lies. All he can speak is lies. There's no truth in him at all. Every time he speaks to you, it is a lie. But when you invite him in, when you stop moving, when you stop trusting in God, he's gonna have that open door to move into your heart, and then you've lost. As soon as you stop moving, stop believing, you have lost the game. Growth is held in the process. I mean, just like if you want to use the working out example, your muscles grow through the process of working out. You grow in knowledge as you study and as you learn. You will always be growing in the process. There's no time when you're not growing. It may not seem like much growth, and maybe it's not, but it doesn't have to be all the time. Sometimes it's just a little growth, but it's growth. There's growth hidden in the process. Where you're at right now may not be comfortable, but you just have to continue trusting and moving forward, because, like I said, you stop moving, you lose. So even in the hard times, you got to keep moving. You just got to keep running that race, knowing that God is on your side. Trusting the process means letting go of logic and reason and just holding on to God's promises, because if you look at the Bible, in the world's eyes, in the world's view, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, nothing in there makes sense. But that's why you can't, like, if you're a new believer, you can't go into reading the Bible and try to make logical sense of it, because you can't. It's impossible. It just doesn't make sense. But that's why there's that verse, you live by faith and not by sight, because if you go into life living by sight and what you see around you, you're gonna be discouraged all your life, Like, if you're going through something, if you're going through a process and you're living by sight and not by faith, you're gonna be discouraged. You're not gonna see God in that situation. But when you live by faith, it opens your eyes to a deeper, basically, you can see deeper than, people who live by sight can. God is allowing you to see more of Him. If you're living by sight, you're not going to see as much as somebody who lives by faith, because people who live by faith are able to see God in every situation, despite what they're going through. So, if you are living by faith, it allows you to be able to go through situations knowing that you're going to come out victorious, and it allows you to see God no matter, what's going on around you. In order to stay away from discouragement, we have to stay anchored to hope. If you look at a ship and its anchor, what it does, it keeps the ship from, floating away. So, if we are not anchored to hope, we're going to drift to discouragement. When I say anchored to hope, in these tough times, read your Bible, pray. A lot of times when we go through these bad things, we tend to blame God, but like I said, God allows it, but He doesn't cause it. And we kind of blame God like He caused it, but he just allows it because He wants us to grow. So we want to, during those times, that's the most important, to trust God. Is in these tough moments. We need to pray, we need to read the Bible, we need to just seek His glory and His face and His peace, because, that's going to keep us from drifting away from Him, because when we drift away to Him, that's going to, we're going to float ashore onto discouragement. We're going to be discouraged, and we're going to feel like there's no hope. But when we are anchored to God, we're anchored to hope. So I just want to encourage you guys, stay anchored to hope. Whatever you're going through, whatever situation you're in right now, it's a process. And at the end of the process is the gift. I want you to keep moving forward. Don't stop. No matter what you're going through, just know that God is with you. There's more on the other side. Keep running. Keep moving. Don't stop. And keep trusting. Love you guys.